Have you ever wondered if people will care about your story? No one will listen. My life isn't interesting enough. Well, your story is worth listening to. It's interesting and people will care. Believe me, because Heather Parady, who is joining us today, convinced me of that a long time ago, which seems like a long time ago. It's only been 4 or 5 months ago. But Heather is a storytelling whisperer and guru and an extremely expedient content strategist. And she's also the host of the Unconventional Leaders podcast, and she's here to talk to us about storytelling. So, Heather, thank you for joining us.
What up? How you doing?
So far, so good. You? I'm ready for this.
I'm caffeined up. Let's
So am
go.
I.
Good.
I may not have a gallon like you do, but I got my Yeti.
Let's go.
All right. So just off before we record, we were talking about a lot of people started creating content during pandemic, and they're awesome. And then you kind of said something about how you've got a lot of content online, and you've learned your own way of storytelling that's people can pick up on and connect to.
Yep.
Maybe we should start this. What is storytelling, or how does it engage people in a community, and why should we care as business owners?
Why should we care as business owners? So, storytelling is essentially translating your idea, your message, what you're passionate about in a form that can be heard and understood by someone else. So people are like, oh, storytelling, I'm gonna have to go, one day Dan walked down the field, blah, blah, blah. It's not like that. It is framing something in a way that presents a problem and a solution and details throughout that. So why should business owners care? If you feel like things are getting lost in translation and people aren't interested in what you're doing, it's probably because they're not connected. And a way to do that is through powerful storytelling.
Is my story worth telling? That's what the majority of people are going to be questioning right now. I
Yeah.
think a lot of us would say we want to,
Mm-hmm.
but will anyone really care?
That's really none of our business, frankly. I think if you're a leader and you have something on your heart, I call it a calling, then our responsibility is to show up and give whatever we have and letting go. And I know that really pisses people off. They don't like it, but letting go of how it's received and perception is half the game, right? So is my story worth telling? I would say some of it is. No,
Oh,
yeah. Some of it is. Now, does your story matter? Yes. Do I tell, you know, my life story to my husband? Yeah, that's called intimacy. It's called, relationships. And I think that there is some sacredness in that that we've really got to protect. And we kind of overcompensated on social where everybody's like taking videos of them crying and posting it on the internet. And not everybody wants to see that, right? And
yeah.
so when I say, does your story matter? It does to the people who love you and who you want to be intimate with. Does it matter to frame everything and figure out a way to put it on the internet? I would argue not. I think identifying the people that you're trying to reach and how specifically you're helping them, and then reverse engineering moments in your life that have had transformation, and then figuring out a creative way to present that. So parts of your story matter in regards to that.
So tell stories about transformation type.
Yeah, so you're looking for a change. So if, I have, I'm a photographer. I was a photographer for several years, and people get really, really uncomfortable in front of the camera. Like,
Oh
you
yeah.
can be like, it has nothing to do with what you look like or what you're wearing or anything like that. People just shake in front of it. And so if I think about I'm a photographer and I'm wanting to book more clients and build my retention and stuff like that, that one small example of something that they struggle with, all I have to ask myself is, when was a moment in my own life where I felt that way, and identifying that change. And then this is what we do a lot of times. We will identify the change, and we're like so broad with it. Like, one time I was so insecure in my 20s, and then I read a Tony Robbins book, and then everything's better now. And it's so broad that it loses a lot of that universal intimacy and depth that we're all craving. And this is where the vulnerability piece comes in. And I'll pause here in a minute because I know I'm going on a tangent, but people always say storytelling's hard, and I would argue it's not hard, it's scary because it requires our vulnerability. So in that photography example, when was the moment where, I had a fiance and I was made, one time at dinner, he had criticized the way that I look, and he's always done that. And then at some point, I got invited to this event, and I learned about my own self-worth and accepting myself. That's so intimate and so personal, and it's such a more powerful story than these broad strokes that we give.
Right. And the vulnerability part is very hard for many, many people. Yet your audience responds to that the most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but here's the end of at the end of the day, we're human beings. And I love Pat Flynn, who talks about the stick it note on your computer. He said a lot of times we'll look at a number, let's say 154. There's 154 downloads on my podcast. And I'm like, damn it, there's only 154, whatever. Pat Flynn says, write that number and put 154 people and put it on your computer and think about 154 people in your living room and how honored you would be that people cared that much to hear what you have to say. So I forgot what you asked. I just started a rampage on that.
Vulnerability. That's what your audience responds to the most. And authenticity is, I would say, is another one.
Yeah. So what I'm saying here with the vulnerability piece is if we try to start translating digital presence to what real life presence is, we can see parallels in human behavior, meaning this is where I was trying to go with that analytic. We have this false idea of like, oh, these internet people, and we start thinking about stats and AI and how we can create a system and manufacture everything to beat the system. We forget that the quote system, these digital presence, is actually flesh and blood human beings behind a screen. And so the same way that I would connect with you is not through BSing, not through hyping myself up. It would be very vulnerable with you and consistent with you and somebody that you can rely on. But we forget that that's the same thing in the digital space.
Oh, because they're still looking at those people as numbers,
Correct.
not people. And I like that flip, 154 downloads versus 154 people.
Right.
Like I know when I started the podcast here I wasn't looking for massive, downloads, 10,000. It was like, if I just have 100 people who just want to listen regularly and it hits them all the time, that's all I want.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Huge. But they're like, oh, Heather, I don't want to put myself in a box. I got a big message. I'm like, I'm sure you do have a big message, but when you just throw up a whole bunch of stuff because you're wanting to self-express, that's what your journal's for. That's what your partner's for. That's what your best friend's for. It's not a strategy to use online.
Let's go on that one. So storytelling is not self-expression, is what I heard.
Oh, no. This is good. No, I wouldn't say that. I just say there's levels of expression. You know what I mean? Like you can be close to somebody and reveal a problem that you had with your father growing up at a coffee shop, but you're not going to strip down butt naked and run around the room. Like there's levels of showing yourself. You know what I'm saying?
That's exposing. I guess, yeah, it's true. That's the same thing.
Right.
I mean, that's another way people are fearful of it because you're exposing. That's the vulnerability part. There's an exposure part
Yeah.
at a deeper level.
Yeah, exactly.
So is there a difference of storytelling if you're out there to create an impact or just to be popular? Because I think when I'm starting to run into a lot of different people, people are starting companies or they want to network either to be popular or to create an impact. And to me, those are two different things. Like people who want to create an impact, they're doing this from something deep and it's like their purpose and their passion. Is there a different way to storytell between the two, or is it the same type of theory?
So here's me being vulnerable with you, and I'm going to tell you a story. So this is something that I have kind of called myself out on recently because I have a format of storytelling that's worked pretty well over this past year. And I've noticed a trend that if I say at the beginning of any of my videos a story about Taylor Swift, I promise you, Taylor Swift, if I use her name, the video will pop. the way that my format is in putting her in there or whatever. There's a couple other examples. I had an interview with a storytelling pastor the other day. His name is Reward Simbanda. And he, on this show, lovingly challenged me that there is a depth to my message that I don't tap into as much. He said he's seen it in a few videos, but not in a lot. And I felt really, like in a good way, checked on that. I'm like, he's so right. I found a format that uses certain keywords and this and that, and I get a lot of engagement from it. But the reason that I'm here on earth is to have way deeper conversations, bring spirituality into it, have a lot of questions, and really say some things that are really unpopular. And when I put out those videos, historically, they don't usually do as well. And so to
By
answer your
numbers, you
question,
mean?
correct. The comments are so much deeper. I had a
Mm-hmm.
DM yesterday, 10 messages from this lady. She voice noted. I haven't listened to it yet because I'm like, I'm gonna have to sit down and do this. But, you know, is there a difference? Yes. And usually that's an internal gut check with you of, am I doing this because I think this is gonna work? Or am I freaking fired up in my bones to share this?
Right. Um, you said you had a system. Do you mind sharing that?
Sure, I have a lot. So which area? You talking about the reels?
Yeah, your one of your specialty is actually
Mm-hmm.
short length content, right?
Mm-hmm.
When
Correct.
was it that the hook, the middle, the learning point of the
Yep.
story?
Yeah. Yeah. So here are the steps, and then you tell me which step you want me to go in deep on. So you have the ideation process, so gathering the idea. Then you have the actual script writing. Then you have the shooting. Then you have the editing. And then the one that I don't really go too much into detail because I don't think it matters, and it's the one everybody thinks matters, is the posting. What hashtag should I use? What time of day? Yada, yada. And I'm like, how about we just focus on making better content? Because I really believe if we make great content, people will find us. So I
Hmm.
really don't have a lot to say about the posting thing. I think it's a joke, but any of those other four, I could probably dive in deep on.
Well, like, you spend a lot of time with me developing the hook, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
what's the frame? Like, so if I'm going to do a 1 minute short or
Hmm.
reel,
Hmm.
we got to start with a hook. And
Nope.
you want just, why
Nope.
not? What?
You
What?
start
What?
with the end.
What?
You
What's
start with
the end?
you figure out what is the one tangible takeaway from this reel. Now, I pull a lot from writers, from novels, screenwriters,
Hmm.
stuff like that. And even in Save the Cat, it's a famous screenwriting book. They talk about having like a log line, this concept, this idea that paints a picture of what this is actually about. And the reason this is so important is for recommendability. So if we think about, and this isn't for short form content, this is for your podcast, videos, whatever. What determines if something's going to do really well is engagement and sharing. Why would someone share this? Is this shareable? Is this something that people would actually talk about? Or is it just this generic kind of idea that's a feel good? Let me give you an example. So if I make a video about, you just need to be more positive in life and everything is just about your outlook and I hope y'all have a great day, yada yada. I'm just shooting this shit with you.
Hmm.
But if I'm like, do you know that standing in the grass at 4:55 a.m. for 4 minutes will decrease your stress levels throughout the day? Please, you know somebody else who's stressed, share this with them. So it's so specific that people are going to more likely to share it. So I start there, identify what your takeaway is before you go to the hook.
Hmm. And is there a middle piece?
There is a middle piece. So usually the way that I approach it is starting with the end, what's the takeaway, and then I work backwards. I'll usually write out several kind of because I love hooks. I think they're just so much fun. I usually just throw up like five on a piece of paper. I'm like, eh. And then I
Yeah.
work on the middle and then I come back to the hook to kind of figure out what's the best. Because here's this is really important. Why you don't start with the hook at the beginning is folks are obsessed with grabbing people's attention. They don't care enough about keeping people's attention. keeping people's attention is when you're actually being effective. It's easy to get your attention. I could turn on the camera and been like, I cannot believe this man did this to my grandmother in the parking lot. People are gonna be like, what?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Those are really morbid, whatever. But it's easy to grab attention. That's clickbait. That's being eccentric or whatever. You're good, man. You're good when you can hold the attention.
And that's with effective storytelling.
See ya.
See ya.
And I said see. I'm just Southern, so it sounded like
see ya.
see ya. I'm out.
No, this is really good. And the other thing too, you keep talking about, well, not today, but usually every time we talked in the past, is intentionality. And what I really got from you is intentionality is such an important factor in effective storytelling. What do you mean by being intentional?
We think that people just hearing our voice and seeing our face and us just sharing whatever's on our mind is good content. It's not. We have to separate out the media side and understanding like someone who consumes a piece of content versus, again, back to our self-expression, right? So intentionality is saying, I'm here to give some kind of value. Now, sometimes the value is entertainment, right? But it's about the consumer and less about the self-expression. Again, that's kind of more of an art. If you're wanting to just, I had this conversation with an artist the other day, differentiating being creative versus creating art. And so the way that we kind of defined it is when you have art, you're just wanting to express yourself. This painting, and I don't care if Andre likes it or not, but when you become a content creator, normally there's a goal there. And so what is the intention of my channel? Specific, what is the intention of this video? And is there a payoff? Because if I promise you that you're going to get something and then I don't deliver it, they're not going to watch your content anymore.
So the way you just described that and explained that to me, my ADHD brain just went, holy crap, that's great. Because that's a structure. So there's a goal, there's an intention. Like, it's almost as if you're setting goals and you need to achieve them. So, or at least gives you a direction of where to go and stay within the lane.
Right.
Rather than just spewing out self-expressed stuff that people don't really want to listen about because we're missing the important part of the story.
Exactly.
So that makes a lot of sense with me.
Yeah.
And then ever since I started this journey with the podcast and all this stuff, I'm starting to notice on other podcasts, if they had an intention at the beginning when they created the podcast, or even like I do, like you got the interview framework today. Like, what's the intention of and the goal of this episode so that there's a direction, not just talking all over the place.
But here's where it gets tricky. Here's yes, and there's also needs to be wiggle room to let it take you where it wants to take you.
Correct. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So even in reels, even in short form, I have a script, but you'll notice this. I'll just like say something quirky or weird. That's not in my script. Anything weird that I say that's like like some little weird that's just Heather coming out. None of that is scripted. Me mispronouncing words, whatever. And so it's like, yeah, have structure, but also breathe life into it, or it's going to be boring.
Yeah. And the thing is like, for me, the podcast, mental health was not in the intention at the beginning. And now it's become a big part of it because, you have to let it follow the growth and where the direction goes. I agree with. Now, the other thing you just said too was that the blah, blah, blahs, you add your little Heatherisms in there. I got a lot of respect for you on that because a lot of people would take those out because that's not showing that, you're not afraid to show that true self. And I think that's a big part of the authenticity. And should the content creator be aware that sometimes if you're trying to hide those authentic personality traits, that it might impede people consuming your content, or why are people afraid to just be themselves?
Why are people afraid to be themselves? That's a whole other thing. I could answer that in part B, but the way that I approach it is, since I work very closely with clients and it's more of a service-based thing, I spend hours with people. I want to attract people who vibe with my personality because otherwise I would be absolutely miserable. I've worked with like really corporate people. It's not my people. I work with people who wear beanies, who have tattoos, who cuss a little, who are very kind of eccentric and like, they're the rebels, they're the outcasts, they're these people. And so a rebel, an outcast is not going to be attracted to my content if I'm well put together. It's like when I am messy, they're like, "Oh, she's my person." And then when we're in a call together, it's not miserable because I'm 100% being myself, the clients being themselves. So, well, who do you want to attract? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's actually setting yourself up for long-term failure because you're going to have to continue to hide yourself
And that
if you
comes
don't
at a
present yourself
cost.
when it comes out. Yep.
Yeah. Well, even at
Yep.
cost to your mental health and to your confidence too. Like,
Yeah.
like I tell people on the podcast, for 40 years, developed a character that was not me so I can fit in. And if you develop into that,
Yep.
then you have a hard time
Yes.
separating it all. And I
Yes.
think authenticity is being searched out more today than it has been in a long time. Not everyone's looking for someone that fits a certain mold,
Correct.
especially your ideal clients. Your ideal clients
Exactly.
want you. Your
Exactly.
non-ideal clients will fight you. So, all right, go away then.
Yeah.
So cool.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
Think about your own behavior. Not you, Andre, but like whenever I get kind of like in my head with stuff, I try to think of myself as the consumer and look at my own behavior and go, well, what do you do, Heather? And for me, I'm like, who are the people I follow? Who are the people I like?
Mhm.
I love the messy people. You know what I mean? I like the deep thinkers and the spiritual people and blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, that's what I like. Why would I, you know, judge myself before I give other people an opportunity to opt into me? You know what I mean? Because I'm like, oh, nobody would like that. I'm like, well, you do.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? So yeah,
Yeah, and it's a tough decision to make. You want to help everyone, but not everyone wants to be helped.
it takes confidence.
Yeah. Yeah. Confidence. Good point.
Yeah.
So, man, we got lots here. I got lots of stuff processing. And what I really like, which you said earlier, storytelling is about translating an idea or thought and reframing a problem solution in a clear manner. And some of your story needs to be shared, not all of it. I think it's a good one. And like you said, I think that's more to do the parts of the story you want to share is the ones that be the listener or the consumer will learn from or gain from and have a transformational point or change in their life.
Well, that
And,
and what you're ready to share.
ooh,
You know what I
that's a good
mean?
one. Yeah.
Brene Brown Brene Brown says people have to earn the right to hear your story, which kind of rubbed me the wrong way because I'm like, because I come from a ministry background, I'm like, no, you have to be authentic and share everything or whatever. And when I got really burned, when I shared some really personal stuff to people and it just didn't go well, now it's, it's not bitter, it's just wisdom that not everybody has the right to hear all of my heart and soul or whatever. I can be strategic in how I'm vulnerable. You can be vulnerable and still have boundaries.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
And with that, I think, like you said, keeping people's attention is the actual goal of storytelling.
Yeah.
And you could do it in many, many different ways. So from this, like storytelling allows you to make real connections, attract your ideal audience, and then, achieve meaningful impact if that's what you're after. So,
Yep.
Heather, you've provided me a great service. You've helped me learn to tell stories better. And I'm at 200 subscribers at the time of
Woo-hoo!
recording at YouTube. And that has a lot to do with you. And where can people find you? And I believe you have a new program starting up.
Yeah. Wrong. It has nothing to do with me and everything to do with you taking action and actually doing the thing. I told you at the very beginning, I said most people won't do this, and you went out and did it. You put your face on a camera and you put out content consistently and you freaking try. And you allow yourself to be seen, like you are
Yeah.
yourself. You're not BSing people. That is who you are on LinkedIn. So no, that has to do with you just doing the work. But yeah, people, I mean, the best thing to do is just connect with me at Heather Parody on Instagram. That's where I spend most of my time. And if, there's anything that I'm promoting or whatever, it's in my stories or my link in bio there.
Nice. And we'll have that in the show notes for everyone to find out too. And I highly recommend you listen to her podcast, in Conventional Leaders podcast. It's a lot of good insights, and you really know how to pull out really great, insightful content or ideas from your guests as well. And you've been talking to some really big guests, Seth Godin and them, and even they seemed a little bit surprised at the types of question you ask and the
Yeah, that's
information
always
you
my
pull
goal.
out. Yeah, that's good. And thank you, Heather, for joining us today. I
Enjoy.
appreciate your
Thank you.
time. And for you, the listener, why are you not sharing your story? Let me know. I'll be curious to hear about that. And again, listeners, thanks for learning with me. Take care.